Hello students, welcome back to my class. Today we are going to discuss one of the prose essays, The Modern Essay by Virginia Woolf. As you know, Virginia Woolf, a 20th century novelist, critic and writer, is well known for her unconventional approach in every aspect of creativity. As a novelist, she is known as a stream of consciousness artist with certain uniqueness of her. Similarly, in critical arena, she is a feminist critic, but with her own unique approach to the issues of gender. So, in her prose writing also, we find a particular approach, a different approach from the conventional way of appreciating the form of essay. And this particular essay, the modern essay, which was actually a review of Mr. Rice's 5 volumes of essays, edited essays, which were basically written between 1870 and 1920 by different contemporary writers. But at the time of reviewing these essays, she is spelling out or she is formulating her own ideas about essay writing. At the beginning of the essay, she is concurring with Mr. Rice that it is unnecessary to go profoundly into the history and origin of the essay, whether it derives from Socrates or Cyrano the Persian, since like all living things, its present is more important than its past. So, from the very beginning of her review, she is talking about only the contemporary issues that concern the essays. She is not going to delve into the history or any other traditional aspects of his essay writing. But she has to focus on the contemporary essay writing, essay writers and the consumers of the essay. So, she is telling that the essay can be short or long, serious or trifling, about God and Spinoza, or about turtles and Cheapside. So, she is telling the theme of the essay or the subject of the essay can be anything. It can move between the binaries. That means the domain of the essay is very open, very broad. It is all encompassing. It can encompass all the discussions in this world, all the ideas in this world. And he is telling further that of all forms of literature, however, the essay is the one which least calls for the use of long words. And immediately she is pronouncing the criteria of a good essay or essay as a literary genre, what it should follow. So, she is telling the essay is only one form of the literature which doesn't crave for use of long words. That means she is confining the form of the essay to desist from the use of long words. And it should give pleasure. And secondly, she is telling that essay should provide us pleasure. As literature, the main purpose of the literature is to provide pleasure. So, essay as a part of the literature should provide us pleasure. And everything in an essay must be subdued to that end. It should lay under a spell with its first word. So, Woolf is prioritizing the purpose of the essay to provide pleasure. Therefore, naturally she is telling that essay from its very beginning, from its first word, it should cast a spell on the mind of the reader. That means essay is not like poetry which will lull us, our senses, or it is not like the novel which will be putting us into a long track of waiting and watching the things to unfold. Rather, from the very beginning, the essay must startle the mind of the reader. It should wake up the mind of the reader from the immediate or general perception of life into something new. And it should also hold it. It should put the reader into a trance. The reader must be separated from his or her comfort zone, his or her ambience of real life into a particular sphere of thought or ideas. And we should only wake refreshed with its last. And by the end of the essay, we should get that wake up, that awareness. And we must have a refreshed idea about the same thing which we may be finding in our everyday life. And it should have a lasting effect. So in this way, Virginia Woolf is giving us a definite idea of the essay, that it should from the beginning startle us, wake us up, and at the end it should give us a refreshed idea about the experienced ideas of our life, and that new awareness must be lasting. And at the same time, she is telling that we may pass through the most various experiences of amusement, surprise, interest, indignation. So these may be the various experiences through which the reader may pass within the body of the essay. But the beginning and the ending must give us that wakefulness, that refreshment of the idea, that lasting impression of the idea served by the writer. Therefore, she is telling the essay must lap us about and draw its curtain across the world. So, essay must hold us, the reader, within its ambience. It should not separate us from the idea. Rather, it should indulge us, put us within it. It must lap us about and draw its curtain across the world. Then she is proceeding by telling that if we compare the essay with a novel or a poem, a novel has a story, a poem rhyme, but what art can essayist use in these short lengths of prose to sting us wide awake and fix us in a trance which is not sleep, but rather an intensification of life. So she is making a comparison that the poetry is giving us a rhyme. It is making our senses lull. indulging. And a novel, it gives us a story, it serves a story. We are expecting something to be unfolded till the end. But the essay, it is giving us an intensification of life, a basking with every faculty alert. And though we are having the intensified vision of life, but at the same time, we must be having our faculty alert. And the first essential quality of a good essay writer or a good essay, she is telling, the first essential, how to write. The essay writer must know how to write. So what does she tell about, or what does she mean about how to write? She is making a comparison with the old essay writers, because in this essay, she is bringing the examples, the comparisons from the whole history of English essay writing, right from Bacon till Mr. Beerbohm and others in 20th century. So she is telling that Mark Pattinson's, but in an essay, it must be so fused by the magic of writing that not just facts, but not a dogma tears the surface of the texture. So she is telling that there are certain essay writers who are presenting certain facts, but an ideal essay must not only stick out the fact or must not contradict a dogma. It should not be about an argument, a debate. An essay is not a debate. And she is giving the examples of Macaulay, Froude and others, and Matthew Arnold. And she is telling that literal truth telling and finding fault with a culprit for his good are out of place in an essay. So essay is not the domain where we should go for finding fault, criticizing. Essay is not to criticize unnecessarily. It is not to be critical about certain dogmas. And the voice of the scold should never be heard in the narrow plot. Essay must not, because essay is a smaller form in comparison to novel. So within this narrow plot, there should not be the voice of the scold, nor the voice of a man stumbling drowsily among loose words, nor the essay writer should just go on using certain words without any particular intensity or intention, aimlessly, vague ideas. So she is again making a comparison, and that this time with a biography. She is telling, a book could take that blow, but it sinks an essay. If we go on using those voices which are endlessly engaged in those meaningless expressions and all that, then the essay will sink. A book may be able to endure that. A biography in 2 volumes is indeed the proper depository, for there where the license is so much wider and hints and glimpses of outside things make part of the feast. She is telling that if somebody is writing a biography, he or she is having the liberty to be critical, to criticize, or to engage in those loose words and all that. But that is not possible within an essay. Then she is coming to another important feature of a good essay, that is, there is no room for the impurities of literature in an essay. She is advocating the purity in the form of essay. So here we may find that Virginia Woolf is a classicist, because purity of form is a classical need. But no, She is not exactly classical, but she is trying to focus that the form of the essay should be pure, but pure in which sense? It should be pure from dullness, deadness, and deposits of extraneous matter. There should not be any dullness, extraneous matter, or deadness. And it should be pure like water or pure like wine. And she is telling that Walter Pater, one of her favorite essay writers, achieves this arduous task because before setting out to write his essay, Notes on Leonardo da Vinci, he has somehow contrived to get his material fused. So she is telling that Walter Pater, particularly in this essay, Notes on Leonardo da Vinci, he had achieved this purity of form of essay. How? Because essay, it is not the knowledge of Leonardo that remains with us, but a vision such as we get in a good novel, where everything contributes to bring the writer's conception as a whole before us. So, purity means the purity of intention and presentation on the part of the writer in developing a vision for the reader, not serving the facts, nor serving the criticism, nor serving the banalities of the words, rather creating a vision. So, after going through this particular essay, the reader finds a particular vision of Leonardo da Vinci than his biographical facts or his aesthetic experiences or anything else. Therefore, she is telling that Walter Pater makes these limitations yield their own quality. Truth will give it authority. From its narrow limits, you will get shape and intensity. Therefore, the essay must serve the truth, and the truth will help in developing a vision, a refreshed vision of the already known ideas or knowledges or experiences by a new idea, by a new perception on the part of the essay writer. And she is discussing almost all the essay writers from different ages of English literature, from Bacon to Thomas Browne. She is telling that they were champions in certain aspects, the splendor of Sir Thomas Browne or the vigor of Jonathan Swift. But she is trying to find out the exact ideal form of essay which is not there with these essay writers. They are best in certain aspects, but they are not the best according to Woolf. And in doing so, Woolf is trying to bring out her own idea, her own characteristics of a good essay or ideal essay. Then another important aspect of a good essay she is trying to give through this writing. She is telling, if the essay admits more properly than biography or fiction of sudden boldness and metaphor, and can be polished till every atom of its surface shines, there are dangers in that too. She is telling the writer should not get engaged in polishing, shining, refining, or ornamenting the essay. Essay is not a literary form where the writer should exhibit his linguistic or his stylistic expertise. If that is there, then the essay will sink, the essay will fail. The essay must have lifeblood of literature, the impulse, a quieter impulse, which has a deeper excitement. Words coagulate together in frozen sprays which, like grapes on Christmas tree, glitter for a single night, but are dusty and garnish the day after. She is making a comparison that if you refine much, if you decorate much, you go for stylistics, style and refinement, then what will happen? It will be just like the grapes in the Christmas tree, which will be very dusty and pale the next day. Then essay must take into account the quieter impulse, which has a deeper excitement, and it should thrive on the gaps and the suggestiveness, which is to be picked up by the reader by his or her own imagination, by his or her own experiences of life. He or she will get the meaning, and that will be living for a long time, and that will be making his or her mind very repressed about the particular idea. And she is telling that the writers like Stevenson and Samuel Butler choose very different methods of exciting our interest in these domestic themes. The ingot is so small, the manipulation so incessant, and that is why what happened, that they are different types of writers. Stevenson is a different type of writer, Butler is a different type of writer. Butler adopted the very opposite method of Stevenson. And think your own thoughts, he seems to say. Butler was for the reader's response, that the reader must find his or her own response. You have to think. But Stevenson wanted to indulge the readers. And she is further progressing in finding out the other characteristics of essay by telling that Victorian essayists yet had something in common. They wrote at greater length than is now usual, and they wrote for a public which had not only time to sit down to its magazine seriously. She is taking the evolution of essay writing in England, and she is telling that particularly in Victorian period, the essay writing became a serious affair. And the essayists in Victorian period, they went for long essays. Why? Because it was the demand of the time. People of the Victorian England, embroiled in the controversy between science and religion, between the development of technology and winning away from tradition, had dedicated much time to reading. Therefore, the essays were longer. But in modern times, in 20th century, what we find, the essays are becoming shorter in length. And he is telling that essay, which was there, a part of the drawing room in Victorian period, became the part of the public space. From the privacy of the drawing room, it went to the public place, the Princeton Hall or any other hall, where it was read out by the writer and which was addressed to the audience who listened. So, the essay is evolving from the longer essays in Victorian period, it became shorter essays, and in the first part of the 20th century, it became further shortened. She is telling that mostly it is written within 1500 words or maximum 1750 words as per the demand of the publisher. The writer has to comply with the demand of the publisher. So, the length of the essay is gradually shortening because in modern times, people have no time. They have to read one essay while they are traveling, or they have to look at an essay when they have just some break from their work. So, essay is no more a very serious literature in 20th century, But still, some of the essayists, they have very well adapted themselves to this evolution of the essay, and within the limited length of the essay, they are still excelling. And she is bringing the name of Mr. Birrell and Mr. Beerbohm. These are the writers who wrote those essays which became shorter, and by losing its size and something of its sonority was approaching more nearly the essay of Addison and Lamb. These essays in the hands of Mr. Birrell and Beerbohm, they were approaching the similarity of form in the hands of Addison and Lamb. And she is particularly praising the essay A Cloud of Pinafore by Max Beerbohm and A Cynic's Apology by Leslie Stephen, her father. And she is telling that Mr. Birrell is certainly good, and so we find that though he has dropped a considerable amount of weight, his attack is much more direct and his movement more supple. But what did Mr. Beerbohm give to the essay and what did he take from it? That is a much more complicated question. But she is praising him as the prince of his profession. According to Virginia Woolf, Mr. Beerbohm is the prince of his profession. Why? Because Mr. Beerbohm gave, of course, himself to the essay. That means personality. This presence which has haunted the essay fitfully from the time of Montaigne had been in exile since the death of Charles Lamb. So, Lamb was the essay writer of personality, the personal essay writer, one of the greatest personal essay writers of English. So, from the time of Montaigne, she is telling, and after the death of Charles Lamb, this exhibition of personality of the writer was taken out from the essay. But Mr. Beerbohm brought it back. And she is telling then how this personality is presented within the essay. That it must have surprised readers accustomed to exhortation, information and denunciation to find themselves familiarly addressed by a voice which seemed to belong to a man no larger than themselves. He was affected by private joys and sorrows and had no gospel to preach and no learning to impart. But this is not the imposition of the personality. This is a personality which blends seamlessly with the reader's experiences, the reader's imagination, the reader's pleasure. The reader accepts this personality as a friendly personality. If you remember Charles Lamb's essays, Lamb confides with the reader and the reader enjoys. So this type of personality is one of the brilliant characteristics of an ideal essay, and Mr. Beerbohm has brought it back to the English essay writing. He has brought personality into literature, not unconsciously and impurely, but so consciously and purely that we do not know whether there is any relation between Max the essayist and Mr. Beerbohm the man. But how you will bring the personality? She is emphasizing the personality must be brought into the essay, not unconsciously and impurely. It should be brought consciously and in a pure form. Pure again is not the classical sense of purity. It is pure from the concept of various other implications except the friendly indulgences. So she is telling that the self which while it is essential to literature, is also its most dangerous antagonist. So bringing the self into literature is not an easy thing. It is also a serious antagonist to itself. Never to be yourself and yet always, that is the problem. Some of the essayists in Mr. Wright's collection, to be frank, have got altogether not succeeded in solving it. She is telling, in this present collection of the essays, most of the essay writers, they have not presented such type of personality where you are yourself and you are also not to be yourself. So in between, that is the aesthetic personality the essay writer must bring into essay writing. Why? Because she is telling that by confining the form of essay, when we have made it short, it is also very difficult to bring the personality in such a manner, because the writer has very limited scope to bring the personality into this way. So she is telling that literature is very stern. It is no use being charming, virtuous, or even learned and brilliant into the bargain, unless she seems to reiterate you fulfill her first condition to know how to write. But still, some of the essay writers are able to present their personalities because they know how to write. You have to make a balance between to be of yourself as well as not to be of yourself. This art is possessed to perfection by Mr. Beerbohm. She is again praising Mr. Beerbohm is by telling that this balancing act is perfected by Mr. Beerbohm. And he has not written the essays by juggling with the words or bringing the jargons by searching in the dictionaries and other things, but simply bringing that quality. A cloud of pinafores has in it that indescribable inequality, stir and final expressiveness which belongs to life and to life alone. Because Mr. Beerbohm is able to represent or bring that life into essay, into the idea. Any essay writer can begin an essay with an idea, but that idea must be blended with the subtle forces of life. It should represent life. It should get indulged with life. It should reflect and represent the experiences of life. And Mr. Beerbohm has achieved that. You have not finished with it because you have read it, any more than friendship is ended because it is time to part. Life wells up and alters and arts. While reading Mr. Beerbohm's essay, you will find that you are completely within a trance, but at the end of the essay, you are taking part of that essay. How? As we take farewell from our friends after gossiping. As if the things have not been finished, it is still continuing in the mind of the reader, and it alters and adds to our experiences and our ideas. Therefore, she is telling that the essayist is the most sensitive of all writers to public opinion, and the essayist is most vulnerable from this point of view, that he or she is most sensitive to public opinion because it directly deals with the public and it directly involves the public and public interacts. But the public needs essays as much as ever, and perhaps even more. The demand for the light middle not exceeding 1500 words, or in special cases 1756, much exceeds the supply. But in her own contemporary time, she is telling that essays people are needing of very shorter form, where the writer has to be very careful of using every space available on the page, because the reader is not interested in going through more pages. Therefore, the length is dictating the essay writer to evolve his or her writing skill. Mr. Belloc, like Mr. Beerbohm, suffers in the process. It comes to us not with natural richness of the speaking voice, but strained and thin and full of mannerism and affectations, like the voice of a man shouting through a megaphone. Therefore, she is telling that these modern essays, in its certain form, it is just like someone is shouting through the megaphone. It is not like the previous writings where it is like listening to or getting indulged with certain friendly discussions. But in spite of that, she is finding one essay writer, Mr. Belloc. He has produced a great number of essays, around 1750. Therefore, she is telling we cannot expect Mr. Belloc to produce as excellent essays as that of Mr. Beerbohm or Mr. Lamb or even Montaigne and Bacon and all that. Because the modern essay writer, he must masquerade. He cannot afford the time either to be himself or to be other people, because he doesn't have the time. He has a limitation. Therefore, he has to masquerade. And as a result, what happens? We are getting essays being supplied every now and then. It is not like waiting for a good essay from a good essay writer after a considerable time. And she is comparing it with the example of a solid sovereign once a year with half pennies. These modern essays, the short essays of 1500 or 1750 words. Then she is telling the essays which bring the collection to the year 1920 may not be the best of their author's work, but if we accept writers like Mr. Conrad and Mr. Hodgson, who have strayed into essay writing accidentally and concentrated upon those who write essays habitually, we shall find them good deal affected by the change in their circumstances. Even the writers, good writers like Mr. Hodgson or Mr. Conrad, they are also affected by this change of taste or change of form in the essay writing. Mr. Lucas, Mr. Lind, Mr. Square, in the bulk, one feels that a common greyness silvers everything. So, all these writers in the contemporary time, they are all being affected by these changes in the form of the essay and the demands of the essay with particular aspect by the reader. And they are far removed from the extravagant beauty of Walter Pater as they are from the intemperate candor of Leslie Stephen. Beauty and courage are dangerous spirits to bottle in a column and a half. So she is telling that in this modern form, shortened form of essay, beauty and courage, they cannot be blended, because these are dangerous things to bottle in a column and half. So it is a kind, tired, apathetic world for which they write, and the marvel is that they never cease to attempt at least to write well. But she is after all praising these writers that they have not ceased their writing according to the demand of the time and demand of the audience. So that is the credit on their part. And the shrinking size has brought about a corresponding expansion of individuality. Then she is coming to another aspect of essay. the individuality. In the Romantic time, it was the I, the personality. But in modern time, the personality has transformed into we. Therefore, she is telling that we have no longer the I of Max and Lamb, but the we of public bodies and other sublime personages. It is we who go to hear magic flute. So, in this way, the evolution of English essay is taking place. And she is telling that in the 5th volume of modern essays, it seems we have got some way from pleasure and the art of writing. But in justice to the essayist of 1920, we must be sure that we are not praising the famous because they have been praised already, and the dead because we shall never meet them wearing spats in Piccadilly. So she is telling we should not compare the essayists of different ages because they belong to different time and space, different needs. So it will be injustice if we compare these modern writers with the writers of the past. The comparison makes us suspect that the art of writing has for backbone some fierce attachment to an idea. And she is concluding her discussion about the art of essay writing by telling, whatever it may be, the essay must give us an idea. And it is on the back of an idea, something believed in with conviction or seen with precision and thus compelling words to its shape, that the diverse company of such writers, they have been so much successful. So without a particular idea or without a particular perception of an idea being presented in an essay, through which the essayist gives us a vision, the essay can never be a good one or ideal one. Therefore, she is telling that vague as all definitions are, a good essay must have this permanent quality about it. It must draw its curtain round us, but it must be a curtain that sorts us in, not out. It should not divorce us from our reality. These ideas, they should engross us like a curtain round us, but it should not sort us out. It should sort us in. For a moment, we should be within the trance and we should go through it, but we should not be permanently taken out of our reality. So, in this essay, we find Virginia Woolf is using very aphoristic sentences like Bacon, and lots of examples, lots of allusions, and as you can see, the aphoristic sentences like, there is no room for the impurities of literature in an essay, or she is also telling like, the art is possessed to perfection by Mr. Beerbohm. So the sentences are very aphoristic, and she is providing a lot of examples, she is making a lot of comparisons, and she brings allusions to so many things to impress her idea that essay can be of any theme, and essay must not be confined to only the long words. It should not impress us about the style of writing or refinement of writing, but it should give us a vision. It should give us a personality. It should give us an idea, a feeling that we are in the reality, we are in the life, but for a moment we are finding a particular vision of a particular idea. So, in this way, she is giving us a good idea of the art of essay writing. Thank you.